Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial is a chill one. We're making a sporty casual sweater featuring the moss stitch and some fun color transitions. Speaking of, by now y'all already know the drill, but just in case you're new, all the fun crochet tutorials and patterns are here with even more dropping twice weekly, so tell a friend and consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 400 grams of yarn. That's 900 yards if you're stateside, and those individual measurements will be on the screen. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us what is your go-to drink in the morning. Now mine has become coffee. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we'll explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting the sweater started, we're all going to grab our category 4 primary color yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook and start off by making a chain the height that we'd like for the collar to be. Now I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 8. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a slip stitch row. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into the chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops on our hook. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Again, into that following chain, insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both. From here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. We are back and our row 1 is complete. Now to get started, on our row 2, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and now put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, we're all going to insert in through that back loop, then again yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. Once more into that following stitch's back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into the rest of our stitches. We have just completed our row 2. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat this row that we have. So simply chain 1, flip our work, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Continue to repeat our row 2 until we now have a portion that can stretch, because remember it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid collarbone across our chest to mid collarbone. Now the amount of rows that we have must end in multiples of 3 that ends on an odd number. Then I'll meet everyone back so we can insert our stitch markers and get started on the rest of our collar. So we are back. We have just completed the first portion of our collar. Now I have a total of 33 rows. This width is just about 5 inches. That is unstretched because remember it does have a decent amount of stretch to it. Now this is going to be the back panel because this is going to be where the seam is. So we do need to insert our stitch markers into the first side row and into the last side row, just so we know that this is the back panel. From here, we're going to continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows for the shoulder portion. So from where we're at, simply chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip into every stitch, then I'll meet you back at the end of the following row. So we just did our following back loop slip stitch row, and I did insert another stitch marker at the edge of the row. I used a second colored stitch marker because this is going to be the shoulder portion. So what we're going to do is just continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows, no increases, no decreases, until we have an odd number of rows that is also in multiples of 3 that reaches from mid collarbone up and over our shoulder. And that's only counting from this first shoulder row that we have right here. Then once we have this portion completed, I will meet you guys back. My shoulder portion of my collar is now complete. So I did an additional 33 rows. That's now a total of 66 rows. This section is also 5 inches or 12 centimeters, or my whole width is 10 inches or 25 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to work on the front panel, which will have the same amount of rows as our back panel. So since I did a total of 33 rows, just counting my back panel, I will meet you guys back when I have a total of 33 more rows. So we are back. We just did the front panel portion of my band. Now, just like the back panel portion, I did add 33 more rows. I now have a total of 99 rows. That's 15 inches or 36 centimeters unstretched. Then I'm sure y'all can guess the last section that we're going to do is the same amount of rows as shoulder rows that we did. So for those of you that have my numbers, I did a total of 33 shoulder rows. So I went ahead and did an additional 33 rows. Now I have a total of 132 rows and my total width is 20 inches or 48 centimeters unstretched. Now from here we can seam everything together. So now we're going to seam our collar together. So we're going to fold our work in half and insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. From here, yarn over and pull through everything on our hook, and we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So finding our first stitch into the front panel, we're all going to insert only in through that front loop. So insert. Finding that first stitch into the back panel, we're going to insert only in through that back loop. When we have these 3 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back. Yarn over, pull through everything, and continue doing this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. So we are back. We have just completed our seam. Now we're going to single crochet along the bottom of our collar. So what we're going to do is chain 1. And all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, and we do need to make sure we're inserting our stitch markers into the same stitches. So start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. And since this is worked into this side row, I'm going to insert my stitch marker into there. This is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop, insert with a single. Let's do that again. My following side row is this raised row, so I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1. Finding my following side row, which is this divot, find that top loop and insert with another. Continue with 1 single crochet into every side row, making sure that we are inserting our stitch markers into the same stitches. Once we made our way all the way around, we should end up with the same amount of stitches as rows that we have. Now once we made our way all the way around, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And also, this single crochet row will be as wide as this portion can stretch, so when it's completed, try our piece on. It should be able to fit around our head, but if it's a little bit too tight, we do some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, we do some stitches with a tighter grip. Then I'll meet you back. So we are back. I have just completed my single crochet row. I did do a chain up 1 and cut. Now from here, we can get started on the front panel. So right before we actually get started on the front panel, we're going to do a little bit of prep work just so we can kind of map out where we want the stripes to be. So we're all going to start by switching out to our 5.5 millimeter hook. Then start by making an even number chain that starts 1 inch underneath your underarm down to where like the bottom of the sweater to be. So you can make this cropped or full length, but we do need to keep in mind that we are going to have a bottom band. Then, counting from the tail end, we're going to start by inserting our stitch markers and map out where we'd like for each of our stripes to be. Now, the first stitch marker is going to be the same for everyone, no matter what size we're making, and that's just going to be inserting our stitch marker into that first chain that we have that's nearest to our tail end. Now, that's going to indicate where our top stripe is going to be. Then, we're going to need to insert our stitch marker into any odd numbered stitch away from our tail end, so that will include that first chain where we'd like for the middle stripe to be, and that is going to be our middle stripe with our primary color yarn. Now I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters away from my first stitch marker, so I've inserted my second stitch marker into my 5th chain. Then we're going to map out where our wider stripe is going to be. It's going to need to be inserted into any even numbered stitch from the tail end. So I've inserted my stitch marker into the 16th stitch from the tail end because I would like for this stripe to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. Now when everything is into place, the next we're going to do is a little bit of practice actually, just so I can show you guys the seamless color change that I did, but you guys can definitely use any color changing technique that you guys like. So for now, place your prep chain off to the side. So right before we get started on doing the underarm portion, we're going to do a couple rounds of practicing how to seamlessly change our colors with chains and single crochets as well. Then once we have that down, we can just go straight into working the front panel together. So getting started with how to change our color when we're working a chain is I'm going to start by grabbing my first color. And since this is practice, I'm just going to start by making a chain 5. Now that we have our chain 5, we're all going to grab our second color, place that over our hook. That's basically going to be a yarn over as if we're doing our following chain with our same first color, and pull through. Now from here, if you would like to tie the tail end to our first color, you can do that, or you can just tug on the first color to make sure that it's nice and tight. And then from here, you continue on with your chain with your next color. Just like that. Now a really quick tip when it comes to doing our color change, we always want to do our color change when we are just one chain away from the actual color change. Because as you guys can see, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chains here. But once we placed our second color on top of our first, because our hook was still connected to our first color, that last stitch was completed with our first color. So for this example, we're going to start with a chain 5, and now we have chain 6 with our first color. There will be more examples once we actually get started on the front panel, but now we're going to do our color change with a single crochet. So I'm just going to use this example as well. So I'm going to chain 1, flip my work, and put 1 single crochet into every stitch using this color of my yarn until we're about to work into that last stitch with this color. So we have just made our way down with our single crochets, leaving that last stitch while we're still using this color. What we're going to do is insert our hook into that last stitch with this color, same way that we would a normal single crochet, and pull through. But instead of yarning over and pulling through with the same color, we're just going to yarn over with the next color that we need and pull through. We're doing this so that once we pull through, the top of this last stitch can still be with this first color. So when we pull through, it's still the same color, but the following stitch is worked with that next color. So just into that next chain, I'm going to insert with a single crochet to show as an example. That next stitch is worked with our next color, and continue on with our single crochets to reach the end of the row. And now that we have this down, we're going to get started with our underarm. So getting started on our underarm portion, we're going to still use our prep chain as a guideline, and I'm going to start with my primary color yarn, and I'm going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that I had from my first stitch marker to my second. So counting from my first stitch marker, I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chains. So I will do 4 chains with my primary color, because remember, the next color is always started when we complete the last stitch. So all together, with my primary color yarn, I'm going to start by making 1, 2, 3, 4. I do need to make a total of 5 chains with my primary color yarn, so I'm going to grab my next color yarn and place that over my hook. Once I have my secondary color yarn on my hook, I'm just going to pull that through that first loop, and I'm going to tug tightly. And now with my primary color yarn, we can now count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chains. Now using my secondary color yarn, I am going to tie this tail end with this working end. And now with my secondary color yarn, I'm now going to make a chain for the same amount of chains that we have from the stitch nearest to our second stitch marker over to our third stitch marker. So counting that out together, I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 is my stitch marker stitch. So using my secondary color yarn, I'm going to do a total of 10 chains. Then that 11th will be another color change. Now that I have my 10 chains with my secondary color yarn, I do need to have a total of 11 chains. So I'm going to yarn over with my primary color yarn and pull through. So placing our next color onto our hook, pull through. That should give us my 11th chain. So counting this out together, From my secondary color yarn, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Then from here, I'm going to tie my tail ends together. Then from here, I'm going to continue on with the rest of my chain using my primary color yarn. So for those of you that have my numbers, from this chain that's nearest to our third stitch marker all the way to the end, I have a total of 24 chains. So I'm going to complete this with 24 chains. So we are back. I have just completed the last portion of my chain, and now we are all complete. We should all have the same amount of chains as chains that we made for our prep row. So I made a chain 40. I double checked. I have a total of 40 chains here. And just as a really quick tip, we do want to make sure that we're remembering these exact same numbers for when we do the back panel. Will be done the same way. And the sleeve is actually going to be done pretty much the same way as well. It's just going to be a little bit longer. Now we're going to get started on our following row, which is a single crochet row. So we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. That's our turning chain. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a single crochet. And from here, continue with 1 single crochet into every chain until we have 1 chain left with our primary color yarn. We've made our way down with our primary color. We should have just 1 chain left with our primary color. So as our refresher, since we should already know how to do this, we're going to insert our hook into that next chain that we have that is with our primary color and pull through. Now we're going to grab our next color, simply yarn over with that color, then continue on with our single crochets, making our way all the way down, and just switch out our colors right where we need. I will meet everyone back. We have 2 chains left to color change once more and to increase. We are back with our first row, nearly completed. We should all have 2 chains left. Now just to compare, this is what things should be looking like so far. We're going to get started on the thin stripe in a little bit, but just to show you guys what the pattern's going to look like, this is a 3-row repeat. It's going to be a single crochet, then 2 moss stitch rows. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you guys are asking why we didn't just carry the yarn over, which you can if you guys want to, but because it has moss stitches in between, which is a gap year stitch, carrying the yarn doesn't really work for this pattern. And a last really quick tip. Each of the color sections should always have the same amount of stitches per row, except for the last one, because that's where we're going to be increasing for the top. So as an example, my bottom section was made with 24 chains using my primary color. So this section will always have 24 stitches, then so on and so forth. Now I found that keeping track of the amount of stitches per section was a little bit easier, because if something looks a little off, you can just count the section instead of ripping out the whole row and trying to start over again. But now that we have this out of the way, we're going to complete this row with our increase. So what we're going to do is just that last stitch with our primary color yarn, but we are going to close it off with our secondary. So we're going to insert, pull through. Before we do that last yarn over pull through, we're going to yarn over with our secondary color yarn, pull through. Then into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase, which is going to be a single, half double, and double all into that last chain. So I'm just going to tie my tail ends together first. And into that final chain, we're going to insert, starting with 1 single crochet, same last chain with a half double, same last chain with a double crochet, and now everyone's row 1 is complete. Now our row 1 should have 2 more stitches than chains that we made because of the increase that we just did. Now the following row is going to be our moss stitch row, because remember it's a 3-row repeat, so we're all going to chain 2 and flip. That first chain is going to count as our turning chain. Then that second chain is actually going to count as a stitch for the following row. So now we're going to flip our work. We're going to skip that first stitch. Then into that next, which is that second stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert with a single crochet. Now we have just formed our first 2 stitches for this row. That first is that chain space. That second is that single crochet that we just did. And now from here, it's just going to be a chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. But we do have some color changes. So I'm going to take away my chain. And just as a refresher, how we do a color change with a chain is once when we are 1 stitch away, which as you guys can see, my following stitch would be a chain. We're going to drop that first color, and with our second, we're going to chain with that next color. Now, since everyone's thin stripe should be the same, we should all have a total of 3 stitches so far for this row. That first is that chain space, second is that single crochet, and third is that chain made with our secondary color yarn. Now from here, we're going to skip 1 stitch, which 1 stitch should be that single crochet with our secondary color yarn, and single crochet into the next with our primary color yarn. So insert, pull through. Then from here, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, and continue that to reach the end of the row. But just to do this color change again, we do have to chain, skip a stitch, and single crochet into the next. But that following stitch is my secondary color yarn. So I'm going to grab that secondary color yarn, place that over my hook, and yarn over with that color. Now this section for me should be 4 stitches with my primary color yarn. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4 with my primary. Then continue to skip a stitch into the next, single crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row, making sure that we are color changing where we need. We are back and our row 2 is complete. Now we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row since we did not do an increase for our row 2. Now what we're going to do from here is our row 3, which is our second moss stitch row. So from where we're at, chain 2 and flip. That first chain is our turning chain. That second chain counts as a stitch for the following row. Now when it comes to doing the second moss stitch row, our single crochets are always going to be worked into our previous row's chain space. So we're going to start by skipping that first stitch into that next, which is a chain space, insert with 1 single crochet. Now so far we should have 2 stitches for this row. That first is that chain space, and maybe a little hard to see. There's 1, and that second is our single crochet. From here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch into that next stitch, which is our chain space, single crochet all the way down. We are going to continue to color change right where we need, and I'll meet everyone back when we have 2 stitches left so that we can do our increase together. So we've made our way down and we all have 2 stitches left. That second to last stitch should be a single crochet. That last stitch should be our chain space, and now we're going to do an increase and also our last color change together. So what we're going to do is chain 1, still using our secondary color yarn, then into that last stitch, which is our chain space, we're going to do a single half double double all into that last chain space, but we are going to color change right after that single crochet. So using our secondary color yarn, we're going to insert, yarn over and pull through, then yarn over with our primary color yarn, pull through, that is our single crochet. Now into that same chain space with a half double and double. I'm just going to tie my 2 tail ends together first. So to continue on with our increase, we have that 1 single crochet, also into that same last stitch with a half double using our primary color yarn and a double crochet. And now our row 3 is complete. Our row 3 should have 2 more stitches than our previous row, and our following row is going to be a single crochet row. Now technically this is a 3-row repeat, which is 1 single crochet, 2 moss stitch rows. But since it is an odd number of row repeats, sometimes our single crochets can start along the bottom of our piece, or they could start along the top. And as you guys can probably tell, we're only increasing into every other row. So for our even number rows, we're not doing any increases or decreases. So what we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, put 1 single crochet into every stitch that we have, doing the color changes that we need. Then I'll meet you back at the end of our row. So we are back. Our first 4 rows are complete. Now the following row is going to be a moss stitch row. So from where we're at, we're going to chain 2 and flip. Remember that first chain counts as our turning chain. Second chain counts as a stitch for the following row. We're going to skip that first stitch and into that next with a single crochet. From here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next till we all have 2 stitches left, remembering to color change where we need. So we are back and we have made our way all the way down with our row 5, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now at the end of every odd number row, we're going to do an increase. And there are going to be the same increases that we did for the previous row. So we are going to chain 1. I did switch out to my primary color yarn. We're going to skip 1 stitch, which should be our second to last, then into that last, starting with 1 single, 1 half double, and 1 double crochet. Now our row 5 is complete. So to get started on the following row, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. That first chain is our turning chain. Second chain counts as a stitch for our previous row. Then we're going to do our moss stitch all the way down. So skip that first stitch into that next with a single crochet, forming our first 2 stitches for the row. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, which should be a color change. And from here, we're going to continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. Remember to color change where we need. So we are back. We have just completed our first 6 rows. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat these rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid-underarm over to the front of our body, roughly where a tank top strap or a bra strap would be, and that should roughly be where our front panel stitch marker stitch would lay on our collar. Now as a sizing tip, this underarm portion will be where the width of this garment is going to come from, since the middle of the body is connected to the already made collar. So if you'd like for it to be more fitted, do fewer rows, or if you'd like to be a slouchier fit, do more rows. Now I'll meet everyone back right after we complete a single crochet row that ends along the top. Then we can connect it into the body and then we can continue on from there. So we are back and my underarm portion is complete. Now I have a total of 13 rows. This total width is just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, and the height for my increase end is just about 13 inches or 33 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to connect it into the collar. So all we're going to do is slip stitch it into our front panel stitch marker stitch. We do want to make sure that we're inserting it into the front panel and not the shoulders, so just make sure which one's which once we're doing this. And into my front panel stitch marker stitch, which is my dark blue one right here, I'm going to insert, yarn over, pull through everything, then I'm just going to do the following row. So now that we're connected into that stitch marker stitch, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then do our following moss stitch row. But now this portion isn't going to have any increases or decreases. So whenever we're doing a moss stitch row that starts along the base, we're always going to start it with a chain 1. Then we're going to skip that first stitch from our previous row, making sure that we're not counting that slip stitch into the base. So just counting that first stitch into that next, insert with a single crochet. That should give us our first 2 stitches for this row. Then from here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row, making sure that we're color changing where we need. Then I'll meet you back at the end of the row. We are back and our first body row is completed. Our following row is going to be a moss stitch row. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work, do our same moss stitches, making our way all the way up with our color changes. Then I'll meet you back to show you how we're going to connect it into the base. So we are back. We're about to connect our second body row into the collar. So I'm actually going to take the stitch marker out because I don't need it right now. Then working across to our other stitch marker stitch, we're just going to find that next available stitch into the base. This is mine right here. Insert, yarn over, pull through everything. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and everyone's following row is going to be a single crochet row. So just put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Our first 3 body rows are completed. From here, we're going to continue to do 2 moss stitch, 1 single crochet all the way across until we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch. We should all end along the bottom, then I'll meet you guys back so we can finish up with our second underarm portion together. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way across with our front panel. Now we're going to complete it with our underarm portion. Now, like I said, we all should have ended along the bottom. So what we're going to do is our following row. It should be our first moss stitch row in our 3-row repeat. So at the bottom, we're going to chain 2, flip our work. Do the same moss stitches that we've been doing this entire time, making our way all the way up, leaving the last 4 stitches, making sure that we are still doing our color change where needed. So we are back. We've made our way up with our first underarm row, leaving the last 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Now from here, all we're going to do is chain 1, skip 1 stitch, then do a decrease of 3 double crochets into the following 3. So yarn over, skip 1 stitch into the third to last, pull through, into that next pull through, and into that next, which should be the last stitch in our previous row, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. From here, we're going to yarn over and pull through the first 4 loops, leaving us with 2 loops on our hook, then yarn over and pull through 2. Now our first underarm row is complete. Now, just like the first underarm portion, we're only going to be decreasing into every other row. So the following row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, then do our following moss stitch row, making sure we're doing our same color changes. Then at the end of the row, we're going to get started on our following row, which is going to be our single crochet row. So chain 1, flip our work, put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches. Then I'll meet you back so we can do our decrease again. So we are back. We've made our way with our third underarm row. So that was a single crochet row, and we have left our last 3 stitches. Now from here, we're going to do a decrease of 3 double crochets to close off the row. So just like our previous decrease, we're going to yarn over, insert your hook into that next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, and also that next stitch, which is a chain space, so it may be collapsed, but it is there. Pull through 4, pull through 2, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to do our 2 moss stitch, 1 single crochet row repeat, making sure that we're decreasing at the end of every odd number row for the same amount of rows that we have for the first underarm portion. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed the second underarm portion, and now we are all done with our front panel. Now, what we're going to do from here is repeat everything we did here on the other side. It will be done exactly the same way. We just need to double check and make sure that when we are connecting it into the back panel stitch marker stitch, we just want to make sure everything's flipped right side out. Then once we have that completed, then we can seam up the sides. So once we have both completed, we're going to flip our work wrong side out. Now to seam up the bottom, what we're going to do is insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. This is still our 5.5mm hook. Then we're going to single crochet in through both the front and the back panel, making our way all the way up. So we're going to insert our primary color yarn onto our hook because we do want to make sure that we're switching out our colors where they're needed because the seam can be seen when it's flipped right side out. So we're going to pull our working yarn through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then just find that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that stitch, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front, insert, next stitch into the back, insert, single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up. Like I said, we do want to make sure that we're switching out our colors where we switch out our colors for our panels. Once we've made our way all the way up, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, we're ready to prep for our sleeve, and that's just going to be a single crochet along our armhole. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning the seams that we just did is now along the inside. Then what we're going to do is insert our hook into the side row that we have that's nearest to the bottom of our collar. Then we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, making our way back up, starting with 2 single crochets. So I'm going to start by inserting my primary color yarn onto my hook, pull through, and I'm going to do a chain up of 1 that's just as secure. Then finding our first side row, remember we're working our way down to our side seam, and this is my first side row. It should be an increase or a decrease depending on what side you're looking at. So we're just going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, into that same top loop, there's 2. Now into our following side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1. Let's do this again. Our following side row, find that top loop and insert with 2. Then into our following side row, this is mine right here. Find that top loop and insert with 1. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way down until we reach our side seam, and we do want to make sure that we're switching out our colors when we need to so that everything is looking nice and seamless. So we are back. We have made our way down with our single crochet row, and we are now at our side seam. Now what we're going to do right at the middle is chain 1 and insert a stitch marker into that chain 1 just so we know where the middle is. Then from here, we are going to continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 2, remembering to switch out our colors when we need to. Once we're worked into our last side row, that's nearest to the base of our collar, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And just as a really quick tip, we should have the same amount of stitches on both sides for our single crochets. All right, so we are back. Our single crochet prep row for our sleeve is complete. Now we can get started on the length of our sleeve. So what we're going to do is 1, make sure the work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our hook into our stitch marker stitch. Then make an even number chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be, and we are going to do the same color changes that we did for the body so that each of the stripes line up. Now, just to let you guys know, for the length of my sleeve, I'd like for that to be just about 17 inches or 43 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 66. I'll meet you guys back once my chain with all of my color changes is complete, and then I'll show you guys how to do the rest. So we are back. I have just made the chain for my sleeve. Now, our sleeve is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our front panel's underarm portion. The only difference is that our primary color for the bottom is just going to be a little bit longer. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 5 with my primary, chain 11 with my secondary, then a chain 50 back with my primary color yarn, because remember I wanted a chain of 66. Now we're going to do our single crochet row. So chain 1, flip our work. Do our single crochet row all the way back, leaving that last stitch, making sure that we're color changing where we need, then I'll meet you back. So we've just made our way all the way down with our first row, leaving that last stitch. Now, like I said, it is going to be done exactly the same way as our front panel's underarm portion. I'm just going to remind you guys how we're going to do this increase, then show you how we're going to connect it into the base. So we should all have just one chain left. So I went ahead and have already attached my secondary color yarn onto my hook. Now all we're going to do into that last chain is an increase, which is going to be a single, half double, and double crochet. So into that last chain, insert, starting with our single, same last chain with a half, same last chain with a double crochet. Now so far, each of the numbers for our stripe section should be the same as the body, except for the bottom length portion, because remember that is going to be a little bit longer. Now, just to show you guys how we're going to connect it into the base, is we're all going to count up the next 2 available stitches. So since we're worked into our stitch marker stitch, here's our first available stitch, here's our second. We are going to connect into that second stitch into the base, yarn over, and pull through everything. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then we do need to work our way up to the following row, so slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, still doesn't count as a stitch, and we're going to get started on our following row, which is going to be our first moss stitch row in our 3-row repeat. So similarly to how we worked our moss stitch rows when we did the body portion of the front and back panel, whenever we're along the base getting started, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work, and we're going to single crochet into that second stitch into the base. So we are going to skip that first, remembering we aren't working into any of the slip stitches into the base. So into that second, insert with a single crochet. That should give us our first 2 stitches for the row so far, which is that chain space and that single crochet. Then we should all have just one more stitch with our secondary color yarn. We're going to yarn over with our following color, yarn over, and pull through. That should give us 3 stitches with our secondary color yarn. Then we're going to skip 1 stitch from our previous row and into that next, which is the first stitch with our primary color, with a single crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet, and we're going to continue on with our moss stitch row per usual, still remembering that we are doing our color changes all the way down. Then at the end of the row, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, do our second moss stitch row all the way back, leaving the last 2 stitches so that we can increase and connect it into the base together. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way down with our row 3, leaving the last 2 stitches, and now we're going to do our last color change, and it is going to match the color change that we have for the top portion of our piece. So we have 2 stitches left. With our secondary color yarn, we should have 1 single and a chain 1. Now we're going to do our increase with our primary color yarn. Now, just like how we did for the body, we're going to skip 1 stitch because we just did a chain. So into that last stitch, we're going to insert and pull through. We're going to insert our primary color yarn onto our hook, pull through. We should have 3 stitches with our secondary color yarn. Then into that last stitch, since that counts as our single crochet. For our increase, we're also going to do a half double and double into that last stitch. So yarn over, into that last stitch with a half double, then into that same last stitch with a double crochet. And just like our previous rows, we're going to connect it into the base. So what we're going to do is count up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2, go ahead and slip stitch into that second stitch into the base, Now that doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. And as you guys can see, the colors should roughly line up with each other. Now we're going to work our way up to the following row. So slip stitch into that following stitch, into the base, still doesn't count as a stitch. Our following row is a row 4, so single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way down, making sure that we're color changing where we need to. Then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 4. So we are back. We have just completed the first 4 rows for our sleeve. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our same rows that we did for the front panel's underarm portion, but connecting it into the base the same way that we did for our previous rows until we worked into our last available stitch right before we start working into the collar. Now, as a really quick tip, the increases, the color changes, like I said, will be done exactly the same way as the body portion. And for this increased portion of our sleeve, we should have the same amount of rows as our front panel's underarm portion because of the way that we're connecting it into the base. Once we have the same exact amount of rows, I will meet everyone back. Then I'll show you guys how we're going to work into the base of the collar. So we are back. We have just completed the underarm portion for our sleeve. Now again, as a quick tip, we should have the same amount of rows as our front panel's underarm portion. So for me, 13 rows, and we should be worked into that last stitch that we have right before our collar. Now from here, we're going to be doing our following collar rows. Now that is actually going to be done pretty much the same way that we did the rows that were worked into the base of the collar. So no increases, no decreases. So I'm just going to show you guys how we're going to work into that following stitch, then just complete this width portion of our sleeve. So we all should have ended along the base. All we're going to do to work our way up to the following row, it is going to be done the same way, but we're just going to find that next available stitch into our collar, which for me, it is my stitch marker stitch. I'm going to first take that out and then insert my hook into that first available stitch marker stitch. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. Flip our work and just do our following row with no increases and no decreases, and that is it for the width of our sleeve. Like I said, done the same way as the width of the body portion, and just continue to do that until we're worked into that last available stitch that we have into the collar. Then I'll meet everyone back so I can talk you guys through how to do the decrease side of our sleeve. Alright, so we are back. We have just worked our way all the way across the bottom of our collar. Now we're ready to do the decrease side of our sleeve. Now the decrease side of our sleeve, again, will be done exactly the same way as the front panel's second underarm portion. So we're just going to do the following row in our row sequence, which because of the amount of rows that we did for the collar, it should be similar to the first row that we did for the underarm portion for the front and back panel. But once we made our way all the way up, we're just going to continue to repeat our underarm rows, decreasing at the end of every odd number row, making sure that we're connecting it into the base the same way that we did for the increased portion of our sleeve. Now we're just going to continue doing that till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet everyone back so we can seam it all together. We are back and we have just completed the decreased portion of our sleeve. Now from here, we're all going to seam it up. So we all should have ended along the base. What we're going to do is the same single crochet seam that we did for the sides, and we are going to do color changes as well, just so that you don't see the next color underneath the seam. So just start by flipping your work wrong side out. Then we're all going to do our same single crochet seam, switching on our colors where necessary, making our way all the way out. Now, if you would like for your cuff to be your primary color yarn, do not do a chain up a 1 and cut, then we can go straight into the cuff from there. So when our seam is completed, the next thing we're going to do is our cuff. So we're going to start with a single crochet row. We're all going to chain 1, that's just to secure, then start with 1 single crochet into every side row. Starting with our first single crochet right here, we're going to find that top loop, insert with just 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. We are going to be skipping that one because 1 single crochet into every other. So finding our next, find that top loop, insert with 1, skip over that next side row, into that next side row, insert with 1. From here, continue with 1 single crochet into every other side row, making our way all the way around. And just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row will be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once it is completed, try a piece on, making sure it can still fit. If it's a little too tight, you use some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, you do some stitches with a tighter grip. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Now from here, right after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. Then we're going to do a slip stitch row. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into the chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. From here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. So we have just made our way all the way down with our first slip stitch row. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just finding that next available stitch, we're going to insert, yarn over, gently pull through everything on our hook. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. We're going to flip our work and put 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Now connecting it into the base is pretty much the same way that we connected the body into the collar or the sleeve into the collar. So from here, we're just going to continue on with our back loop slip stitches with no increases, no decreases, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows for our cuff. Now from here, we're going to seam it together, and the seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way that we did for the collar. So the same outside loop slip stitch seam. To talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure the work is slipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to do our same outside loop slip stitch seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we are back. The next thing we're going to do is our bottom band. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Then we're going to do a single crochet row with our primary color yarn, just putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So finding our first side row, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert, starting with 1 single crochet. Into that next side row, this is mine again, insert with another, and that's it. Continue with 1 single crochet into every side row that we have. As a quick tip, this single crochet row can be as wide as this portion can stretch, so once one is completed, try our piece on. If it's too loose, you do some stitches with a tighter grip, or if it's too tight, you do some stitches with a looser grip. And now that our single crochet row is completed, we're now just going to do the same back loop slip stitch rows that we did for the cuff. So just to talk you guys through it, right after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. Then just do our back loop slip stitch rows, no increases, no decreases till we made our way all the way around. Then I'll meet everyone back so we can seam it all together. We've just made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch bottom band. We don't have any more stitches left, so now we're going to seam it together. So this seam will be done exactly the same way as the collar and for the cuff. So do our same exact outside loop slip stitch seam. We don't have any more stitches left. Do a chain up a 1 and cut. Then we are all done. Then the last thing we have to do is simply weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.